Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'in lahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. To proceed, this is our 58th lesson, our 58th lesson of the Ship of Salvation. And we continue to be in the chapters of the prayer. And we have reached section 18a in the translation I am using, which discusses conditions for the Fatiha. So the author says there are 10 conditions for the Fatiha. There are 10 conditions for the Fatiha. So these are conditions for the validity of the recitation of Fatiha. So if one of these conditions is not fulfilled, we don't fulfill one of these 10 conditions, then the recitation, that recitation of the Fatiha is not valid, meaning it doesn't count. So one would have to repeat the Fatiha from the beginning. Or if one learned that after one had left that position, one would have to return to that position. For example, one learned in a subsequent rak'ah or recalled in a subsequent rak'ah that one had missed one of these conditions, then it would mean that that recitation of the first rak'ah and the rak'ah itself did not count. However, invalidating one of these conditions does not invalidate the prayer itself, but rather it invalidates that recitation of Fatiha. So one would have to recite Fatiha properly again from the beginning. Basically, that's the upshot. If we don't get this, we have to repeat the Fatiha prior to exiting the prayer. There has to be a Fatiha in every rak'ah of the prayer, as previously stated, excluding the rak'ah of someone who is a latecomer. Right? So we have to get these right for our Fatiha to be right. Our Fatiha is a pillar of the prayer, so our Fatiha has to be right for the prayer to be right. Right? So we have to get these, and may Allah grant us that. The short way to learn these is what? Short and simple way to learn these, not necessarily easy, is to learn how to recite Al-Fatiha from a competent Quran teacher. We do that. We recite with proper tajweed from the Basmalah to the last verse of Al-Fatiha. We will fulfill all of these conditions. That is a short way. However, the long way is these conditions that the jurists discuss. And there is a condition that he does not reference, though it is implied. The whole Fatiha must be recited in Arabic, meaning that it is pronounced in Arabic even if one is taking aid in that pronunciation from Roman transliteration. So the Fatiha has to be recited in Arabic. He doesn't explicitly state that, but it should be understood. Someone who's unable to recite Al-Fatiha in Arabic, they do not translate it. They recite an alternate dhikr, or alternate verses of the Quran, but those also wouldn't be translated. And if you're a non-Arab, it's unlikely you're going to know other Quran. So you're either reciting Al-Fatiha as it is pronounced in Arabic, or alternate dhikr. And that was discussed in its place in the discussion of the pillars of the prayer. La ilaha illallah. So he says there are 10 conditions for the Fatiha, meaning 10 conditions for the validity of a given recitation of the Fatiha. If one of them is unfulfilled, one must repeat that recitation. The first of them is order. So one cannot recite verses out of order. If you jumped ahead and skipped a verse, the point to which you jumped ahead would not count, and you have to go back from where you broke the order and continue. 2, continuation, and that is al-wala or al-muwala. And as stated previously in other condition sets, I tend to pronounce this word as, translate this word as continuity, and it means that one thing occurs in immediate succession after the previous thing without, for example, an extraneous type of speech. So continuation, or as I would translate, continuity, means that there not be something that is foreign to the Fatiha that is pronounced between any two words of the Fatiha or any two verses of the Fatiha. So an example of something that would be foreign is if someone were reciting Al-Fatiha and they sneezed and said Alhamdulillah. That is foreign speech to the Fatiha. It doesn't invalidate the prayer because it is dhikr and you're not speaking to anyone. But it does invalidate the recitation of Al-Fatiha. For example, and foreign means that it is not part of the prayer. So if, for example, there was a prostration of Quran recitation, and one followed one's imam, one recites, say, 3 verses. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. The imam recites a verse of prostration, prostrates. The follower must follow the imam and prostrates. During that prostration, they're, for example, going to say, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, stand up. That is not considered foreign to the recitation of Fatiha because it's a sunnah of the prayer, or even we could say in following the imam in the prostration, an obligation of the prayer. So that is not considered an unnecessary disruption. But for example, saying Alhamdulillah when one sneezed would be considered a gap that broke the continuity, or the continuation as translated here. And thus that second condition, prayer would still be valid. You just start over from the beginning. So nothing extraneous. I'm saying Ameen. If your imam had recited Fatiha and you had started before the end of his, he said Ameen, you say Ameen with him, no problem. Asking for mercy. For example, your imam says, Alaysa Allahu bi ahkamil hakimin. You're in the middle of Fatiha. Your imam says that. You can pause your recitation. Bala wa ana ala dhalika min ash-shahidin. Keep reciting Fatiha. That is a sunnah in that place, so it's not considered an unnecessary gap between the two verses. However, things that are not called for in the prayer, as we stated, like saying Alhamdulillah, for example, for a sneeze, that would be considered a gap between two verses that broke the continuation. 3, paying attention to the letters, or you could even more specifically say, showing proper care to all of the letters. What is a person who is considered illiterate with respect to prayer? Ummi. It is someone who improperly recites one letter of Al-Fatiha. So he says paying attention. You could also say it's showing proper care. And that essentially means that every single letter is properly pronounced. Some of us might have embraced Islam or grown up in non-Arab lands or not grown up around Islamic education, and certain letters of the Quran are quite difficult for us. So we may need a little bit of assistance in properly pronouncing some of these letters. Where do we get that assistance? As previously stated, a good Quran teacher who teaches tajweed, and they teach us proper makharij, proper pronunciation, points and techniques of the given letters of the Fatiha. And as practice, and prior to one accessing such a person, though it is not a replacement for such a person, a good recording from a reciter like Al-Husari or others can also help you a lot in that regard. Number 4, he says paying attention to the emphases. And that is how he translates shadda, or more specific, tashdidat, right? Such as the lam of Allah in Bismillah that has the shadda on it. And the author is going to treat independently the places where there are these emphases. One has to show proper attention to every one of them, meaning that one pronounces every one of them. Otherwise, what you're doing essentially is subtracting a letter, because a shadda or a tashdida is a doubled letter. So if we neglect one of them and don't pay attention to one of them, we have actually subtracted a letter. And for example, in the word Rabbil Alameen, and English people, we might have a tendency to say Rabbil Alameen, right? Not do tashdid, not make emphasis on the Arabic letter ba, represented by B, and that would be a neglect of a single letter of the Fatiha. Condition number 5, not to commit a long or short pause intending to cease recitation. So what this means is a long pause, whether you intend to stop reciting or not, or a short pause intending to stop reciting. However, what is meant by the pause is a deliberate pause that is without an excuse and is long. Long means longer than the pause it takes to breathe, and to inhale and exhale takes a while, right? You're doing it deliberately without an excuse. So, for example, if one briefly forgot the next verse, or one has difficulty in pronouncing, so they paused, that's acceptable, even if it's long. And as stated, you might pause for a long time to do prostrations of Quran recitation, for example. That's acceptable. But to pause for a long time deliberately for no reason, that would break the recitation. Or to pause intending I'm no longer reciting Fatiha. So don't do that. Don't stop your recitation, and don't just stand there not reciting anything for no reason. And you'll be fine on this number 5. Number 6, reciting all the verses from them being, reciting all the verses of the Fatiha from them being Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which is called Al-Basmalah. You recite all of the verses of the Fatiha, you must recite them, and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is a verse of Fatiha in the view of the Shafi'i school. 7, not to recite in a manner that alters the meaning. So an example of that is if someone said an'amti or an'amtu instead of an'amta alayhim, right? That alters the meaning. One mustn't do that. To occur, that the Fatiha occur while standing in an obligatory prayer, or the alternative for standing for someone with an excuse, for example, sitting for the one unable to stand. 9, to ensure the reciter hears the recitation, and we emphasize this in the conditions of takbir, we're going to emphasize it here. Because we English speakers, when we say reading, qira'ah, we don't typically mean that you're pronouncing it so that it's audible under your breath. But qira'ah of al-Fatiha means that in Arabic and means that in the sacred law. So if you just think the Fatiha to yourself with no excuse, like you're not mute, or you're able to speak, but you just are used to praying in your mind, used to reading in your mind, and you think the Fatiha to yourself, that's not enough. You have to recite it so that it's audible if you have normal hearing and there's no background noise, no disruption. 10, not to breach the recitation with an invocation dhikr that one is not commanded to recite, right? So, excluding dhikr that, so meaning don't do a dhikr that's not from the interest of prayer. And we referenced this a little bit when we were talking about continuity, right? So like alhamdulillah for someone who sneezed, or some other dhikr. Someone just loves saying Allahu Akbar. Fatiha, there's recited Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I mean, Allahu Akbar, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nope. But Ameen to the Imam, Alaysa Allahu bi ahkam al-Hakimin, and so on, no problem. That's from the interest of the prayer. La ilaha illallah. And then this next section, which in the translation we are using, is section 18b. He mentions the 14 emphases, which is the plural in Arabic, tashdidat, the shaddas, if you will, of al-Fatiha. And we are going to read them in Arabic because they are in Arabic, so they're not particularly relevant otherwise. So the author of Safina in Arabic says the tashdidat, the emphases of Al-Fatiha are 14. Bismillah, above the lam in the word Allah. Ar-Rahman, above the ra. Ar-Rahim, above the ra. Alhamdulillahi, above the lam of Allah's name, Lafdul Jalala. Rabbil Alameen, above the ba. Ar-Rahman, above the ra again. Ar-Rahim, above the ra again. Maliki Yawmiddin, above the dal. Iyaka na'budu, above the ya. Iyaka nasta'in, wa iyaka nasta'in, above the ya again. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, above the sad. Sirata al-ladhina, above the lam. Anamta alayhim, غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, above the dad and the lam. And those are 14 shaddas, or 14 emphases, and those are in the mother of the book, the opening of the book, Al-Quran Al-Azim, As-Sab' Al-Mathani, the 7 oft-recited verses, the greatest verse of the Book of Allah, the greatest chapter of the Book of Allah, this gift that we were given. Ummah of Muhammad, may we learn to recite it with presence, following in Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.